If you're anything like me, you have this library of games that has a backlog that just keeps getting bigger and bigger over time. It's filled with games that you know that you'll enjoy and games that you know that you're interested in, but for one reason or another, you just don't get to it. And as it gets bigger, it gets more intimidating. It starts talking to your friends about you behind your back. It starts sending messages to your family on Facebook. It sits in the corner and it stares at you with haunting eyes. And you don't know why it's looking at you that way, but you're sure that it's dangerous. But I understand that because there's new games that come out and we want to play those. We get distracted by it, or sometimes we just like slipping into an old pair of shoes, something we're comfortable with, like I often do with Terraria. But today, I'm here to talk to you guys about a game that I've ignored for far too long, and you likely have as well. And it's a game that we can't ignore any further because if we do, it's going to come for us in our sleep. I'm here to talk to you guys about a game that has mechanics that are so innovative that I still have yet to see them reflected in games today. I'm talking about a game that has obvious ties and inspirations to some of the greatest media of our time. I'm here to tell you guys, it's time to stop ignoring Dragon's Dogma. Or else. The hallmark of a great game is one that can withstand the test of time. No matter how many years pass, no matter what barriers the industry breaks, no matter the improvements in technology. These milestone titles don't have to be thoroughly groundbreaking. Sometimes it can just be a few mechanics, or maybe it's how the entire game is packaged. And what's crazy is these legendary titles, these perception-shattering titles that move the industry forward, aren't always the most popular titles. And sometimes they're seldom recognized outside of their niche audience that they actually appeal to. With each trailer of Dragon's Dogma 2, I kept finding myself awestruck, as if this game was too good to be true. Big monsters, unique classes, Monster Hunter-like body-breaking mechanics, nuanced crafting, enhancing, debuffing mechanics, utilizing your terrain in combat, and a magic system that just feels so grounded. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an RPG lover's wet dream. Then I realized something that nobody in my circle was talking about. And it's hidden right there in the logo, in front of everybody's eyes. If you zoom in, enhance, and zoom in, there it is, the number 2. Meaning that there was a first game. This is my reaction to a game that I slept on for over 10 years. I'm going to be honest with you, this game fell into the background for me, and it's kind of obvious why it did. 2012 was a massive year for games. It was Diablo 3, Mass Effect 3, Borderlands 2, Max Payne 3, Far Cry 3. There was a lot of 3s that year. Halo 4, there you go. There's one to break the mold. But it was a big year for games and a lot of really awesome games, a lot of really memorable experiences for me that came out in 2012. So it's easy for this game to have kind of faded against the backdrop of the rest of those games. But I'm really upset that this game was one of those games that I missed because it's already one of my favorite games of all time, and I'm playing it in 2023. I can't explain to you guys how excited I am to talk to you about Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma is a revolutionary RPG, and I don't mean that lightly. While it's definitely like games that I've played in the past, it's also like nothing I've ever played before at the exact same time. Developed and published by Capcom, this game stands out for its unique world, its AI companions, and its layered combat mechanics. Dragon's Dogma, a game released in 2012, has captivated me in 2023 more than many recent titles have in years, outside of Baldur's Gate 3 and a couple other outliers. While this game definitely is dated by its fidelity, and I won't fight that, there are a ton of set pieces that made me take a moment, genuinely RP walk and just kind of slow pan the camera around and take it all in. Dragon's Dogma's open world also feels genuine and dynamic and alive. Random monsters are just off the beaten path. Pawns and vendors are walking the road. My companions are chatting with me, albeit a little bit too much, providing me with valuable information about the area or the monsters or anything else about where I am. And the day-night cycle is something I also really want to point out. In my opinion, this is something that Final Fantasy XV did really well. For all of its flaws, night travel in Final Fantasy XV was frightening, just like it is in Dragon's Dogma. Not only was visibility limited, but some of the most dangerous monsters and engagements were found at night, and that really filled the world with a sense of mystery. This dynamic environment that Dragon's Dogma creates has a sense of realism and unpredictability. It kept me engaged as I traversed these forests and caves and ruins, mountain passes and towns. It's just genuinely enjoyable. I've been really lucky this year. I've had the opportunity to play a lot of games, and the benefit to that is you get to kind of compare games back to back. And in this case, I ended up playing Dragon's Dogma after I played Starfield. And Starfield does a really bad job at making worlds feel alive. And I realize that like some of the worlds aren't going to be alive because there's no life on those worlds. They wanted to ground the game in a sense of realism in that way. However, it's odd that a game that has no grounding in realism, where a dragon literally stole your heart, feels more real. It feels more alive. And the reason why is because it's just their use of NPCs, and it's also their use of enemies and random animals and things like that. There's a few bushes off the beaten path for you to go and pick some berries, and you see a traveler, a merchant walking down the road that all of a sudden gets attacked by goblins. You jump in to save them, and then a quest pops up as a result of that. Everything feels like it just clicks together. And that's an incredible feeling when you're playing a game. You feel like an active participant in it. You feel like the game is responding to your actions. And that's a really powerful feeling, and that's something that really drives this game home for me. Now, I realize that it's not the most beautiful game compared to a lot of the games that are out right now. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of flaws to this game as well, but there's also a lot of beauty in those flaws. There's a ton of areas in the game that you can go to and be like, wow, they had a lot of imagination. They had a vision when it came to creating this game's world. But there's also a lot of areas that you'll go to and realize the game will never actually send you there because those quests were never put into the game. This was a game that was never finished. And it's still better than most games that I've played over the last 10 years. In a 2012 interview with IGN, Dragon's Dogma's director Hideki Itsuno stated that the game was originally planned to be much larger and more ambitious, but the team had to make some cuts to be able to meet their deadline and budget. Quote saying, "We had a lot of ideas for the game, but we had to make some tough decisions about what to include and what to cut. We wanted to make sure that the core experience was as polished as possible, so we focused on that and cut out some of the more ambitious ideas. Some of the features that they had cut out or reportedly cut out were a larger and more open world, more enemy types and boss battles, a complex crafting system, and a more fleshed out story and character development." It's unclear exactly how much content was cut from the game, but it's clear that the team had to make some sacrifices to be able to get the game out on time and within their budget. Itsuno mentioned in previous interviews that he had been dreaming and designing the game for over 8 years while he was working on Devil May Cry. And I can't help but think that years later, Capcom is probably kicking themselves for not letting that game have more time to cook. I think it's also worth noting that Dragon's Dogma was released in 2012. At the time, the gaming industry was still in the very early stages of transitioning into their current generation of consoles, the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. This means that the team back then was also working with less powerful hardware than we have today, which probably also contributed to the scale back of the game's ambition at the time. Despite scaling back, Dragon's Dogma was still critically acclaimed at the time, and since then has developed a pretty large cult following among many fans of the action RPG genre, and I am now a member of that said cult. What's really insane to me is the fact that Capcom didn't realize the value that they were already sitting on, this treasure of a game that was already being worked on. They didn't give it that extra time to cook, and that's not what you really want to hear. Now, I realize that a lot of the things that they were probably working on at the time or that they wanted in the game at the time are going to be in Dragon's Dogma 2. That's going to be awesome. And I'm hoping the 10 years or more that it's been since the release of Dragon's Dogma 1 have been spent working on Dragon's Dogma 2. Because I genuinely do think that there is that much scope and depth in the plans for the original Dragon's Dogma that they could have easily been planning it for another 10 years. There are some really cool things happening in this game. We never like to hear about how these studios have to cut their budgets or raise their deadlines or whatever it might be. It is the reality of the industry, but it's never anything we want to hear. And in this case, with this game, when it's playing at its strengths, it's one of the greatest games I've ever played. When it's not, you can tell it's the moment that the executives walked into the room and said, "You're done." And that's really sad to see. Now, I've talked a lot about how Dragon's Dogma is this really innovative game, and one of the most groundbreaking features of it that actually did make it into the final version was the pawn system. And 11 years later, nobody has tried to or been able to replicate it. Pawns are these AI-controlled companions that you can either recruit or you can customize because you have one of your own, and they assist you in your adventures. These pawns are more than just typical AI followers. They actually learn from their experiences, and they adapt to your style. They offer advice, they strategize in battle, and they even make recommendations based on the knowledge of the world or the areas that you're in, not just the monsters that you're fighting. And they learn these things from playing with other players as well, because you get to share them with other players and use other players' pawns. This system not only adds a lot of depth to the gameplay, but it also fosters this unique bond between you and your AI allies. The pawn system set a new standard for NPC companions in RPGs that has never been met, making Dragon's Dogma one of the most innovative and immersive experiences that I've ever had the joy of playing. Instead of having standard multiplayer, they have the pawn system. And what's wild about it is that it actually works, and it works really well. When you first make your pawn, you just kind of choose their inclinations. It's their personality, the architecture of their personality. Are they going to be the front line, the back line, focusing on recovery magic? Are they inquisitive and they're trying to learn more about the world? Are they trying to charge in or combo moves with you or something like that? And that's just the baseline. Once they actually start playing with you, once you start sharing them with other people that are playing the game, they start learning more about the world, more about combat, more about how you fight, the moves you use, what vocation you're using in combination with the vocation that they are using or the class that they're using, how to best combo with you, how to best assist you. And sometimes that's in combat, sometimes that's out of it. They'll just tell you, oh, I think there's a chest over here, or this enemy's weak to fire, or I think there's a quest around here, or something like that. And it feels so dynamic. It keeps the game's pace moving, and it feels good as a result of it. And it's something that I never knew I wanted from a game until I played Dragon's Dogma. And again, what's crazy is that it actually works, and it's something that's over a decade old. And nobody's tried to do this yet. I cannot wait to see what they do with Dragon's Dogma 2, because they've only improved it from what it was before. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Dragon's Dogma's combat. Imagine you're in the thick of it. One moment you're dodging one strike, and the next moment you're climbing on top of this giant cyclops. You're just trying to stab it in the eye so you can bring it down to the ground, all because you're trying to distract it from the mage that's going to cast this giant tornado that's going to envelop the map. It's a rush, with every single battle feeling like a new challenge that makes you think on your feet. The unpredictability, especially when you're fighting new monsters, learning their moves, their weaknesses, it's what keeps you engaged. And when you finally bring down a new enemy, especially some of the more challenging fights, the sense of accomplishment is very much real. And that's something that's really difficult to find in a lot of games. What's truly special about this game is that every single fight feels personal. As you play, you learn to recognize enemy patterns and you adjust your strategy on the fly. You team up with your pawns, and together you guys tackle these obstacles as one, as a group, and everybody, including yourself, learns from it. The beauty of Dragon's Dogma is that it gives you the tools and the freedom to be able to approach combat however you want to, making every single victory feel earned. Dynamic moves like Hindsight Strike, where you can dodge and then deal more damage if you timed your dodge correctly, or jumping from high places to be able to deal more damage, finding enemy weak points. And by the way, weaknesses are not always obvious. And once all of these different pieces start falling in together, you can learn to be able to take down one of these enemies every single time that you see it. And if for some odd reason you forget, well, your pawns will always remember. I get the same level of accomplishment playing Dragon's Dogma just as much as I've gotten from Elden Ring. And if you know what I'm talking about, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That rewarding feeling of knowing exactly how to fight an enemy, knowing when to dodge it, when to block it, when to parry it, all the above. And what's awesome about Dragon's Dogma is it allows you to approach that from whatever angle you want to. Do you want to play fast and in their face? Well, play like a dagger build. You want to be slow and tactical? Use a big giant sword like Guts from Berserk? Go ahead. Maybe you want to be in the back shooting arrows or magical arrows. Sure, fine. Maybe you want to take really long time to cast a massive spell that envelops the entire map in hellfire. Awesome. Do it. Do whatever you want. That's the approach that you can play Dragon's Dogma. And that's awesome, because every single way that you can play the game feels rewarding, regardless of whatever style you want to choose, regardless of what your personality or your preference is. And it's awesome. It just genuinely is awesome. That's all I can say. Another part I really enjoyed about Dragon's Dogma was actually the character progression, and this is something that a lot of games get wrong, but Dragon's Dogma doesn't. This allows you not only to grow and adapt your character, but also your pawn at the same time to be able to suit whatever your playstyle is. And you can change that at any time that you want. At the start of the game, you choose from a basic vocation: fighter, strider, or mage. Each one of these vocations has their own skills, abilities, and equipment. As you gain experience by defeating monsters and completing quests, you increase your overall level. This enhances your stats, but concurrently, you also earn discipline points. This is a separate form of currency that you use to be able to upgrade skills and also unlock skills in the future. But the great thing is that Dragon's Dogma doesn't just restrict you to a single path. As the game progresses, you can branch out to advanced or hybrid vocations at any time, blending the aspects of the initial tree of skills that you had. For example, like combining the strider with the sorcerer to be able to make the magic archer. This system encourages experimentation, allowing you to be able to switch between vocations at any time you go to an inn. And it's not just about leveling up, it's about tailoring your class, your character, to whatever desired playstyle you want, adapting to every different challenge that you face in the game. And the best part about it is it's not just limited to your character, it's your pawn as well. There's two things I really like to their approach to a class system. One, it reminds me of Final Fantasy XIV, where I can just switch my job at any time and it doesn't really cost me anything. After you have done the leveling and purchased that job to begin with, you never have to pay anything after that. You can just switch anytime you want. I can play a fighter at the beginning of the game, and then later in the game, I also unlock a bunch of skills for sorcerer, and now I'm playing as a sorcerer. And what else is really cool is some passives from certain classes also carry over to other classes. So you actually do want to take the time to level as many of the vocations as you can. Another benefit, or hidden benefit in my opinion, especially when I was getting used to playing the game the first time playing it through, was that I also get to learn everything about my pawn while I'm doing this, because I play the vocations as well that I level them at. So I know how their skills work, when to use them, how to use them, and everything else. This is a really cool system that not only gives you a fair bit of experimentation, but it really does allow you to play the game however you want to. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give a spoiler warning, because the last thing that I want to talk about is the end game. So if you plan on playing this game and you haven't played it yet, you can just go ahead and skip across to the ending of the video. After defeating the final boss, you will find yourself in a transformed world, shrouded in darkness. New enemies, harder fights, more quests, more loot, and more ways to be able to upgrade your character. The initial pinnacle of endgame content is what they call the Everfall Dungeon. This is a massive cavern with 15 or more doors, each one offering a different challenge, some being transformed versions of enemies that you've previously fought. Some of them are entirely new. Completing this will give you the game's true ending or final ending and another final boss. Now, after this, or during, whichever you choose, you can also go and take on the Bitter Black Isle. This is another piece of endgame content that was introduced as a part of the Dark Arisen DLC. Here you're going to find yourself in a maze with a ton of new enemies, new bosses, and some of the most strongest equipment in the entire game. Now, I've really only scratched the surface of the endgame in Dragon's Dogma, and that's mostly because I just can't really choose exactly what vocation I want to play in the endgame, which one I want to gear up, which means that I also need to change my pawn, and it just turns into a whole entire thing. Gotta love freedom in video games, right? But what I love is that I put 40 hours into the game, and there's at least another 100 hours of gameplay just in endgame content after finishing it. And that always feels good to have. This is a game that you definitely see the vision they had. Though it wasn't fully realized, it's still a great game in its own right, and in a lot of ways, it's better than a lot of games that we've had over the last few years. And I'm really excited for Dragon's Dogma 2, because what it's looking like is it's looking like the vision realized. And man, is that going to be awesome. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to tell you just to wait till Dragon's Dogma 2. No, I'm going to tell you to play Dragon's Dogma 1, because one, it's just impressive to see how much innovation happened so long ago that was never realized or actualized in any other game outside of this one specifically. And two, it's just a lot of fun. If you like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, you're going to have a blast playing this game. Combat is just incredible. Genuinely, just awesome. Just really fun. Simple as that. Now, I didn't really get into talking about the narrative. Reason being, I don't like talking about spoiler content, and also on top of that, the narrative is probably the weakest part of Dragon's Dogma, by all means. The reason I say that is because that's where you see the most content that was probably cut out of the game. So I don't really want to talk about it because a lot of it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So Anyway, I hope that you guys pulled... oh, there goes my voice. I hope you guys take some value out of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys give the game a shot. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, sub to the channel. I'm going to be definitely oh my God, I'm losing the ability to talk. I'm definitely going to be covering a lot of Dragon's Dogma 2 in the future. It's very late here. I'm hoping that I can get this edited and then turned in and scheduled before the Dragon's Dogma 2 showcase. We'll see. But I need to go to bed. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe, my friends. I'll see you next time.